need both factors?
No, one or the other. Health is freedom. Money with years means years go out. Money.
How often does the Jubilee year come?
Everything.
We have, what's the sequence of the years? The Jubilee year. No, after the Jubilee year, what's the first 6 years? And then you have
Shmitta.
The Shmitta year on the 7th year.
Yeah.
Then you start all over again. Another 6 years, Shmitta year on the 7th year. And you go that 7 times 7 is 49, and on the 50th that year is the Yovel, the Jubilee year. And at that time, all slaves,
More upon does the Abba have, meaning an extra way of going free does a Jewish lady slave have. As a matter of course, a Jewish lady slave is not a slave unless she's a girl.
How old she has to be a Jewish lady slave? How many young? And up to what time can she be a slave? After puberty.
Puberty.
In addition to other ways, what other ways can she go out? Or the death of her master. Now, any one of those ways would free her. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Now, what if whatever one comes first frees her? Is that it? Okay, fine. We understand that. Do you understand that? Yosef Yaakov?
Yes, sir.
Good. Fine. Wonderful.
Slave whose ear is bored he doesn't have much to do. Well, no. He wants to stay with his mirror for whatever reason, either his shipcha he wants to stay with, or his slave children, or he knows when he got a good thing, he can stick around. But, so, for whatever reason, he's an Ebony and he doesn't want to go. So he has his ear pierced.
Now, can he do it himself?
No, his right ear pierced the door.
The door has the first ear?
No, yeah, you do, otherwise it's just battery. Okay. Hanir Tzinikta, his board is acquired with the boring of his ear, because it hires his freedom. By Yovel, with the Yovel, the Jubilee, and ordinarily, if master dies, will serve the son if the 6 years old, young girl, chain, that just what you would do for the Nirtza, that he would go, a Jewish male slave is by money. You can see that it's written by Yikra. The acquisition, what is the acquisition for money?
Yeah, by virtue of his. Where are you at?
No.
Well, let me ask you a question before we go on with this thing. Okay,
from the money that makes his acquisition. Yes, what did you say?
What was the case you were discussing? Those 5 things that you have to support be interesting?
Oh, yeah. It took the 5 things that a person, the injury, pain.
All these things in Mishpatim. Moshe's tsar, Moshe's shame, tsar, pain, rifui, curing, shevis, how much time a person's anazic damage causes.
So pain is separate.
Pain and suffering.
And then Naphtali had a very good question about the boring of the ear.
Why that? And the ear, aim. They are my servants of the Almighty God. And this ear that heard this, and now chooses to be an Eved, a slave, an Eved la'avodim, a slave to slaves, this ear shall be bored. This is a punishment for choosing a human slave over being a Eved Hashem, a slave of the Lord.
You probably mentioned the pain and everything that goes with that.
I understand. Obviously, they're going to do it in a way that minimizes the amount of pain. But the fact is, unfortunately, you have cases where ladies make a hole in their lobe of their ear for beauty purposes. So it's not that happens. But it is not a proper thing for a Jew to choose to be a slave. He should try to be a free person and do the mitzvahs of God without somebody else on his back. I admonish you, and I'm telling you in all sincerity, you are all of the highest caliber intellect. You deserve to be learning Gemara, not just. This is where it all comes back to. You come back to the same point all the time. You ask additional questions that are legitimate, and they should be things. But the Gemara, the Mishnah, is limited in the amount of information it gives us. That is the reason why Baruch Hashem in the Gemara amplifies it and explains all these details. And we have others, commentaries in addition to the Gemara. I mean, Osher, we have the Mordechai, we have Marshal, we have Rashi and Tosfos, we have other commentaries, many of them. and Mr. Betzes, they bring all kinds of shittas, various shonim and everything that explain and amplify it so that you have a complete picture of what it's all about. And that is where we should be spending our time. And we're learning Mishnayos at this point in order to get used to the concept of learning. But the truth is that we, as soon as possible, say for instance we finish this entire Masechta in Gemara and Kiddushin. That's the way it should be. Given that kind of a thing, Baruch Hashem, we'll make progression. And there is, the Gemara says in Mikra, if you learn Bein, it's a standard, but it's not much of a standard to make your capacity to learn better. A Mishnah, it is a standard, and you get rewarded because you begin to learn how to understand and analyze it. Gemara ain't in capacity to understand the words of Chazal, to understand the Das Hashem, the will of God. And this is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to learn the will of God in order to be able to implement it in our daily lives. And hopefully, sooner than later, we'll get to start learning Gemara on a constant basis. I remember when I was a Talmud in Yeshiva, most of my thrust of my time learning Gemara. I would say more than 80% of my time. But of course, this is where it's all at. This is what develops your capacity to learn good enough. And you start learning, there it is. I found only one man out of 1,000. What does it mean? You found one man out of 1,000? Rashi says there, out of 1,000 people that start learning Mikra, 100 are going from there to learning Mishnayos. And from the 100 learn Mishnayos, only 10 are successful in learning Gemara. Gemara, only one comes out to become a posek.
Can we deduce from that, though, that in the time of Shalom?
Everybody should be learning Torah all the time.
What I'm saying, though, is we can deduce because 1 hour, it means the same thing, or not?
No, when 1,000 people come to learn Torah, you have to start out with something that's easy.
Wasn't it almost universal this time, though, from that?
It should always be universal. This is our obligation for every Jew. What was it? It's not supposed to be exclusive.
So what I'm saying is, do you learn from that? Do you learn from that? That everyone...
No, there were certain generations where it was universal, that education was there. And the Gemara was such types of generations.
Shlomo wasn't so?
It might very well be. But
what about, give me a thing on the physical dimensions of this. How many pages of this 2,700 blocks of Gemara? Shas Rabbi, which includes them?
Yeah.
The whole Mishnah?
Yeah.
Okay. How many pages would you say is Mishnah alone, that same size? Is it a tenth the size of the Gemara?
I would think so, believe me.
Say 270 pages.
The thing is that you've got to constantly review it because
Those are blocks.
unfortunately we keep on forgetting.
Those are blocks, times 2, it's 600, right?
Yeah. I recall before I got to Smith, I already covered a lot of and taken examinations on it.
Puskin, how many are there? How many pages would you say that? There's 10 times many as more, or many more?
It's a tremendous amount.
The required ones. And there's many lost ones, too.
No,
Would you say there's 100 times many, 1,000 times many as more? Many generations of people.
Years and years, they're making a poster now in Yerushalayim. They're not true of the commentaries. And for 60 years they've been working.
Is anyone trying to get pile of manuscripts or not? What about all the old ones they've got?
They're doing the best they can, but I'm sorry. Whatever it is, it's required with money. You can see if it's written. Are you looking in the text, gentlemen? Because from the money for his account is acquired with money. Incidentally, the Barzanur is just giving the conclusions of the Gemara. He's not giving all the arguments, all the explanations, and as a result, you feel frustrated because he's not giving enough explanation for us to really, and that's the reason why we will, in fact. It will be well. Shtar with a document. Shenamar Ma'amo Ivro, it says by the case of the Amo Ivro, by the female slave, if he takes for himself another wife. You must understand something. This is the Mishnah, but I'll explain. Was sold as a tender age, before the age of 12, the age that she was free. So the fact is, she was sold at an early age. This was intended as a marriage arrangement. Either the master or the master's son would marry this young girl, and she would become a full-fledged Jewish wife, with all the privileges and obligations of a Jewish wife. If the master should take another wife, the rights of this young girl, entitled to all the rights of a Jewish lady, She is supposed to be properly fed, properly clothed. Is supposed to go and live with her sexually, like a Jewish husband should. And the money, instead of the money be utilized to purchase her as a slave, it would be called your odah. That terminology is that it would use it to be like money to marry her. And it was permitted. And so we really wanted the young girl to be married rather than be. So we learned that compares her to another woman, a Jewish woman that can be acquired. Jewish woman can be acquired in marriage. A Jewish woman can be acquired with a document. Remember, we learned in the first Mishnah, a Jewish lady can be acquired by kesef shtar v'miyah, with money, with a document. Since another Jewish woman can be acquired by a shtar, Amma b'shtar, so also the Amma Ivriya can be acquired by a shtar. And we learn out from Amma Ivriya. We learn with Eved Ivri, we learn out that an Ivri, a Hebrew male slave, can be acquired with a shtar from the fact that we know Ivriya that we know already can be acquired with a shtar. Because we have a pasuk, you can see it's written in the Word, it says, well, Ivriya, and to compare the Hebrew male, Hebrew female slave, Ivriya, we compare the Hebrew male slave, the Ivriya to the female. And we learn in the Mishnah that he can acquire himself and every. What's Shani mean? It says the Sof Sheishon at 6 years, Yotziv Chavshi goes out free. So Shmitta, the Sof Sheishon, even if the 7th year had come in the midst of the 6 years, let's say for instance he was acquired on the 4th year of the Shmitta, and that means in the 3rd year of his service, the Shmitta year is coming there. He still has to serve through that Shmitta year, and he's not freed until he finishes up the 6 years. You can see, how do we know that? Because it says in the pasuk, Sheish Shanim Yah, he must serve 6 years. So he has a requirement to serve 6 years if nothing else intervenes. He has to fill up his obligation to work for 6 years, and also includes the 7th year of Shvi'is, if he hasn't finished his 6 years yet. Sometimes he works even on if his 6 years hasn't been fulfilled. Now you must remember, there's a big basic difference between an Eved Ivri and what is the basic difference? The basic difference is this. He is really not owned by his master in the sense the Eved Knani is. The Eved Ivri, in fact, if he's owned, say for instance, the master is a Kohen. Now, if the Kohen owned an Eved Knani, the Eved Knani would have the privilege, while he was being a slave, of eating truma, just like the Kohen and his family could eat truma. An Eved Ivri, even if it's owned by a Kohen, cannot have the privilege of eating, because in truth, his ownership of the Kohen master is not the same type of an ownership he had on Eved Knani. He only really owns him for purposes of utilizing his services, and not for purposes of treating him as a piece of property. You understand the difference? Let's continue with the Martha. Eved Ivri can be freed by the Jubilee year, the thing, even though he hasn't finished the 6 years. If he meets the 50th year, the Jubilee year, in the midst of the 6 years, Motzio, lets him go out from thing even before he's filled up the 6 years. 2 years before the Yovel, he became an Eved Ivri. He serves the first year, which is 6th year of the Shmitta, and he served the Shmitta year because we learned the Shmitta year doesn't free up. And on the Yovel year, he's free. He's really only served a little more than 2 years, and he's free. And then the growing kesef, the diminution of money, he's also freed that way. You can see if it says there, Ba'amo Ivriyo, in the case of the female Hebrew slave, and Shmos Chapalav also, he put it, and she can be redeemed. She can redeem. We compared, like we compared earlier, a Hebrew male slave to a Hebrew female slave. In Konu Rabo, his master acquired him with 600 Suzi, whatever you want to call it. But who also the taste of so shlish on his face, and therefore in the future he was supposed to go out at the end of 6 years. So we find Kana Avodas Kol Shana Vivona. In effect, the master has acquired the work of every year for $100. we'll call it $100. Or 100 zuz, if those atzmos, if he comes to redeem himself, his master must diminish from the amount of money he has to come up to redeem himself, the value of the work of the years that he had worked. In other words, say for instance he was purchased for $600, he had worked 200 years, so therefore the work for each year is worth $100 presumably, and so therefore at the end of 2 years he can purchase his freedom not paying $600, but only $400 because he has worked out. Excuse me. Any questions so far? I don't know if I'm a good speaker or maybe I talk with such a drone that you fall asleep on. It's okay, you understand it. Now, all the ways in which an Eved Ivri can acquire his freedom by shunning, by years, with the diminution of money. So the Mishnah says, Yisirah, in addition to all these ways, an Amu Ivriyo can also be acquired by Shekona Atzmo. She can acquire herself with all these ways that we just mentioned. And also, Visimoni Naros, the signs of puberty that a lady enters through, usually when she enters the year of 12 years. And at 12 years, one day, she enters, we would call that nowadays a bas mitzvah. Just like when a Jewish a young boy enters puberty, it's called a bar mitzvah. To be a year later, 15 years in one day. He gets certain signs. This, in fact, is what really makes him, up to the time, really, Al-Bidin, he's really not a bar mitzvah. Although he may be years, God forbid, there might be a shadow whether or not he's really a bar mitzvah in that sense. Nowadays, we presume, because most people are, enter puberty, we presume that this one is also there. But actually, if there was a physical examination, sometimes the person is really not a bar mitzvah.
You would be obligated to follow anything?
No, we give some halal. We depend on the majority definition.
Had there been one, though?
Huh?
Had there been one?
Has there what?
Had there been a physical examination?
No, there really is.
Suppose it happened, though, suppose the rabbi of the community. When does that end? When does that stage end?
20.
But 20 is certainly a purpose.
Yeah.
Even if there's no signs. Yes.
So this Siboni Naros is another way in which Amu Ivriyo gets free, other than the fact that we're supposed to work 6 years. But if she was acquired when she was 10 years old, as soon as she gets Siboni Naros, she is free at that point. She don't have to work. She doesn't have to redeem herself either. It's just automatically free at that point. Like we learn out Yochinon, she goes out in Kesef. She goes out free, one thing. Which goes out free? Free go law, seals Lazu. And we add to her this additional going out. This one. According to the Bartanura, and Amu acquires her freedom with the death of her master, just like a Nirtza. Remember, the Nirtza is the one that works beyond 6 years. And he acquires his freedom with also to your female slaves. Female slaves do the same thing. The Gemara talks about you also do for the female slave just like you do for the male slave in relation to another thing. One of the things that you have to do when you free a slave is to give him like what you would call nowadays a grub stake. Give him a certain amount of animals and everything so he gets a fresh start. You understand? It's just like Abdullah, when they free now a prisoner from prison, they give him a little so he can start all over. Well, and then the Jews were a little more in this area, and they used to give him. Well, let's go on to the third Mishnah because we have learned the third Mishnah already. It's a good thing to review.
Can you handle that part of it?
Oh, do the best you can. Joe, paying attention?
Yes.
Jewish.
Yeah, with 4.
Is acquired with money, a document, which in this case usage. It's not the traditional where a pattern type. In this case, the slave serves the master, and by his serving the master acquires ownership of the slave.
Yashikia! That sounds real good. I didn't mean derogatory.
Is that clear?
He's occurring 3 times in a row. It's like a prior fixed pattern. We have that all through Shas. There's times that one time the Chazok is established only about twice in a row if there's a question of Sakonishness, which is a danger to Jewish life, and even 2 times, like for instance, God forbid should never happen, an infant died during Milo. and twice it happened in that family that infants died during Milah, so any other youngster that's born in that family, we postponed the Milah until we're sure that the child would not be under danger of having. You understand? And the same thing here, but this type of chazaka we're talking about here is very well explained, like Naftali explained it. It's a question here, usage. If the slave performs acts of servitude to the master, this is a method of acquiring him as a slave. That is separate, distinct method other than the method of by money or by document. You understand that? Joe? Yes or no? I didn't hear it. What? Yes or no? Did you grasp it? I'm talking to you. You hear it?
Big question.
This usage that the master uses this man as his slave is a method of acquiring him as a slave.
You mean using up his labor as he's purchased?
This is the way he's acquired as a slave. This is you acquire him by purchasing him or by getting a document to getting his own. It's another way of getting a title to him.
Which is?
By him using it. If the slave does something for the master, that is the method in which the master acquires title.
Like picking up an animal for the he actually does a good service to symbolize that the contract?
Yes. The service that the slave does.
A small service? Or
yeah. If it's done for purposes of effectuating this master-slave relationship.
Isn't there money required as well?
No. This is a specific and separate method of acquiring a slave. Do you understand that now?
Besides money?
Besides money and document, yes, I said that. That's what the Mishnah says. You get it? You understand? Good. You hear the word, but I didn't think you grasped the concept. Now you understand it?
I don't see why anyone would allow that to happen unless...
We say it does happen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, we're not fighting this thing. Again, see, you also ask difficult questions because it's the realm of the Gemara to ask these questions.
Yes, sir.
And that's why I say, gentlemen, as Hashem, we go through the entire Mishnah Gemara Kiddushin. In the meantime, we'll also perhaps learn another Masech in Mishnayos too. I want you to keep your hand on both things. You understand?
Is that an unusual way of acquiring?
Because the reason is because we compare a slave to real estate, karka. And when real estate, if you want to, one of the ways of acquiring title to real estate is by working the land. And by working the land is an indication that you are acquiring. So the same thing is when you work, it's a way of acquiring title to slave. You understand that? Okay, fine. Yeah, we're getting there. Now, it's only difficult because we're not used to them. If we get used to them, no problem at all. It becomes second nature.
Could you repeat the phrase in there that says that?
A slave who was born a non-Jew can be acquired with money, or with a document, with chazaka, or with this servitude.
Chazaka. That doesn't.
No.
Chazaka
usually means a prior fixed situation, but in this particular case, it means a servitude, a service. By doing a service for the master as a slave, that is a method of acquiring title.
Prior fixed situation, you mean like 3 times the chazaka?
Yes. So we're not talking about that type of talking about this, because we compare an Evet Klani to karka, to real estate. And by real estate, there is a legitimate way of acquiring real estate by, say, fencing an area. That means that you are indicating ownership over that land. So here too, either the slave does something for the master, or the master does something physically in relation to the slave. For instance, he picks up the slave. That's like acquiring the slave. That's also chazaka. Either the slave does something for the master, or the master does something in relation to the slave to indicate he's the master.
Yes.
Good enough. Fine. Now let's finish this up because, and we'll repeat this again tomorrow with the Martin, and we'll go to the next mission. Hopefully, Mr. Samuels will be here tomorrow too.
And he acquires his
Why is it? Anytime a slave acquires any property, it automatically belongs to the master. So that being the case, if the slave handled any money, even to purchase his freedom, as soon as it got into his hand, it automatically was the master. He wouldn't have anything to give to the master. So to inform and be able to purchase his freedom, he has to do it through an outside party, where he doesn't handle the money. And that's what he's saying. But a document he can acquire his freedom to himself. Why? Because Rabbi Meir's view of slavery is that it is some kind of a benefit for the slave to be a slave. If he's a slave of a coin, he can eat truma. If he's a slave eats trail, he can continue to living with a sheep. And so therefore the slave would feel that it would be a demerit to him if he'd be freed. In such a circumstances, the only way he can be freed is if he's prepared to be free. That means we have a general rule in the Gemara. You may do something meritorious or good for a person, not in his presence, without his consent. But you can't do something derogatory towards a person unless he gives consent. And this consent, according to Rabbi, is something derogatory. Therefore, only one that can go and receive his freedom through a document is a slave himself. Chachamim say no. It's possible that if a person intends that the master doesn't have any control over the money, that he could give it to the slave on the condition that the master does not automatically own it. So they say, you can receive the money for yourself, because they can specify this particular money is not going to be to master. Although ordinarily the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Meir, ordinarily whatever the slave acquires belongs automatically to the master. But he can get a document freed by a document through others, because the viewpoint of the Chachamim, the majority opinion, and the law of them, is that freedom is, generally speaking, a good thing for a person to have, as in contradiction to slavery, because a person can now marry a Jewish girl. Before that, he wouldn't be able. As soon as he's free, he becomes a Jewish person, like anybody else. Although he's born a non-Jew.
What if someone was a slave who was a slave, but he wasn't married when he became a slave? He can't marry he can't marry a Jewish girl either, can he?
Why can't he?
You said he couldn't marry until he gets free.
Well, we're talking about an Eved Knani cannot marry a Jewish girl.
He can marry on the time his master stopped him from marrying or not?
Why should he be able to stop it? He's not owned by the master. All he's got is a right to his service, that's all.
Again, the net should serve.
The money should come to somebody else, because we don't want the master to have control of it and thereby own it before it comes to his hand. All right, we'll repeat this tomorrow, gentlemen. And hopefully, if we come on a regular basis, then we'll be able to make more progression.
Must you stop now? Please go.
Yeah, because I have to go and take your middle brother to the doctor.
Yes, sir.
Doctor. Excuse me, gentlemen. I seem to be running from one task to another. But we learned it over. It's get a little more clear in your mind. Is this more fixed?
Yes, every time we go through it, yes.
I mean, you got a whole big bunch of them back there. Okay. Well, of course, I have another shirt tonight, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
More the merrier, you know. Tonight we'll learn a little, because I learned something that I ordinarily not learned, but it's something very nice. I have learned this perhaps sometime in the past, but for the benefit of those Talmidim who haven't heard it, I will repeat this thing with your indulgence. And a father is obligated to teach, to do certain things for his son. Among them, to circumcise him, to redeem him if he happens to be the firstborn, and the father and the mother are not either a kohen or Levi. Along the Torah, to teach his son Torah. If he can't teach himself, of course, then he is taught Torah. And also, Asir Isha, to marry him off to a wife. Along the Umnos, to teach him a trade or skill. And others also say that he has the obligation to teach him how to swim in water. And these are the obligations that a man is obligated to do for his son. If, God forbid, a man doesn't do it for his son, that doesn't mean that the son is off the hook. Sometimes the Bezdin steps in to do what the father didn't do. For instance, if the father didn't circumcise his son, the Bezdin sees that the son is circumcised. And if, God forbid, the Bezdin also did it, then the person, when he gets old enough to understand that he has to be circumcised, he sees himself be circumcised, and he goes to a mall. As it's happening to many Russian Jews, that unfortunately the government didn't permit them to be circumcised, and they come here to America, and Baruch Hashem, they are now being circumcised because they want to be full-fledged Jews, mitzvahs that they kill. And now, in regards to redeeming, a person has...
Where's the look on the page?
What?
What's the word in the left paragraph?
I am just reviewing Choftes Omanala. We're going to get to Chavama Omanala, and we're going to learn, but I don't like to go in the middle of an Indian, into the subject matter, what you have in the background. In relation to redeeming, I am reviewing the Gemara all the way up to this point. This verbally. Redeeming, it says a father has obligation to redeem his son, and we learn out that if, God forbid, the father didn't redeem his son, then he has, the son himself has redeemed himself when he gets old enough to be able to do it. And then in relation to learning the Torah, your son has obligation to teach. And of course, God forbid, if the father didn't have an opportunity or did not teach his son, then the son is obligated to do it himself. As we all are. In other words, you can't say that since my parents didn't, my father in this case, did not personally, I'm off the hook. Not at all. We have the responsibility to do it ourselves. And now the learning of Torah is tremendous in the sense that it has so many different benefits that it's mind-boggling. The Gemara says in our thing that any sickness a person may have is cured if he learns Torah. The Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, it adds to a person's life, well-being in every way. And so to learn Torah and to mitzvahs is the ideal situation for every Jew. There's nothing better for a Jew to do. If a person has, we have in this week's Seder, you should be perfect, pure, complete with the Lord your God. Not like Goyim that depend upon witchcraft or any other thing like that to do it, worry about what's going to be in the future. We should completely trust in God that everything will work out just right. And don't worry about what the future is going to bring. If we do what we're supposed to do, Rabbi will see that we have the bracha and the tzlacha that we need to function and do the things we need to do. This is unfortunate that a lot of people, unfortunately, don't have that faith that they should have in God. And it is understandable. I'm not being critical, because a lot of times the person hasn't got virtue of the fact he hasn't got the understanding of the greatness of God. I've told you I would do this. I will try to Xerox the first portion of commentary on the Chumash case, where he discusses the various gradations of Amunah. It's true sometime in the past, but Baruch Hashem, since we have a change of Talmidim, so from time to time the new Talmidim will also be exposed to these concepts. Suffice to say, his main trust is, as a person broadens in his experiences and intelligence, he appreciates more and more how much he is dependent upon Almighty God. When you get to the full bloom of your intelligence, presumably at that point you should realize you need God very much in every area of your life, and there's no way in the world that you can go and exist or even pretend to have any hope for the future unless it is through the aid of God. Knowing that, it is very simple to make proper decisions. Learn Torah and do mitzvahs. That's what it's all about. You don't have to do it as a compulsion or as a difficulty or a very hard decision. It would flow from the fact that you want to serve God with all the love that you possibly can display. And the greatest love of God is to show God that you appreciate what He is doing for you at all times, and display it by a faith in Him and observing His commandments to the best of our capacity. And of course, as Hashem, if our capacity increases, our capacity to do these things. Perhaps I will start with Chof Tes, Amud Beis, on the bottom there. Let's start from the two dots, about 10 lines from the bottom. Uno. You have that, gentlemen? On
Chof Tes.
the other page, on page 58, in Shas Gemara. It says, about 10 lines from the bottom, in the middle of the dirt. You have it? Well, no, will you show him Mordechai?
No, double line. That's exactly right. All right, here.
Right. Rav Chisda praised about Rav Chodahut, and he was a great person. In other words, he was a younger man, but he was a great Ben Torah. So he was praising him. Omar Lei, Rav Huna said to Rav Chisda, Shiyavi Yodacha, when he comes into your hand, in other words, when he comes to visit you, and be Talmud scholar. When the younger man came with the Rav Chisda, Chazi, Rav Huna saw the low parish to Doro. He saw he didn't have a turban on. In those days, everybody who was married wore turbans. Just like nowadays, some people have a custom wear talis gadol until they get married. Of course, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't wear it from bar mitzvah on. I mean, it's certainly a legitimate reason. A Jew is obligated to God. But there are some that have, they don't put it on ordinarily until they get married. All right. Anyway, so in those days, in that place, they were accustomed.
It's not the same thing as tefillin for the lady.
No, this was the custom there.
Yeah.
Gemara talks about, we're talking about married ladies. All right, come. Well, we all have to go sooner or later. I'm not pushing it. Hamduna, there was a great, and he says, when he comes to you, come bring to me. He also, when he saw he saw he wasn't wearing a turban. In those days, everybody was married, wore a turban. So Rav Hamduna said to Rav Huna, Lo Nisibono. I haven't gotten married yet. Lo Nisibono. I'm not married yet. You have the place, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Let's show him the place again. He immediately turned his back. Omalei, he said to him, his back turned to him. How does he see to it, that you don't show yourself to my face? Until you get married. The Hagwar is answering your question. Rabbi goes into his reason. Omar, behold, if a person is 20 years old, he hasn't married a lady. All his days he's sinning. Omar says, sin do you think? He says, he may not be doing the fulfilling of mitzvah for who, but why should you call that a sinner? It's pretty strong language, isn't it? All his days, God forbid, he might be thinking of sinning. And that is also an improper thing for a Jew to do, so he didn't want to have anything to do with anybody like that. To get married and to try to have children is a great mitzvah. The person that does that brings the Shekhinah to Israel. And there are a lot of benefits from it, besides everything else. And also we learn in the Yeshiva Rabbi Shmuel, Adam waits for a person. Mosa Yiso Isho, when will he marry a wife? We have this choice.
This is God talking? Masai?
Yeah, God is waiting. When are you going to get married? Once he reaches the 20th year, Lo Nasa, and he hasn't yet married, or he's not even looking. Sometimes you didn't meet the Besherta yet, so you didn't meet her, so you have to. I'm not saying God forbid that if you're not married at the age of 20, we stand you against the wall and shoot you down. No. But you got to constantly keep on looking. Omar, so God says to such a person, this is a general rule. Tipa atzmosov, let his bones swell up. All right. Omar Rav Chisda said, Haida Difno, Rav Chisda, who was very gung-ho about people getting married early, he says, Haida, the reason I am more superior to my fellows than the Sosor, because I got married when I was 6. If I got married when I was 13, at the top of the page, I could say to the Satans, who was the Yitzhak. Here's an arrow in your eye. In other words, he couldn't influence me one iota. They have pure thoughts all the time. And when you learn Torah, this is almost all. This is the Gemara language. Omerle Robel Rav Nassan or Ami. When your hand is on the neck of your son, and you still have some control over him, you've got to influence him as best you can to get married. Now, in order for a person to get married and choose the proper choice, in my own opinion is, based on what I've learned, that you have to first learn Torah to know what you're doing, and make a proper choice for a man. Go and marry a lady just because you got a little passion for her. When you're a young man, you got passion for a lot of young ladies. But not every person that you look at is the one that you should marry. Because you got to marry one that's a proper mate for you, a proper a mother for your children. It's very difficult at that time. Things clearly, but you have to. Excuse me for the aside, but I think it's important. In the yeshiva, I went to yeshiva, and I asked him, what should I look for in a wife? In my early 30s, I was 22 when I started. I was in the yeshiva for 13 years. So I was, in my early 30s, I was changed side. So he says, he says, what do you want? He threw back at me. That's the way in the Gemara. You throw back a question at the person that asked you a question. I says, well, I would like a woman to be a Yer Shemayim. And at that time, Rosh had that reputation. He said, you're always saying Yer Shemayim. And I was taken aback. I said, is Yer Shemayim